Is the government policies in light of COVID pandemic fostering a new era of government dependence? We're going to be talking about that on this segment of Stopping Socialism TV. As always, I am Donald Kendal, joined by Justin Haskins. But before we get into that topic, I have to put that call out there, like I do every video, that if you want to help us get this message out there, the message of Stopping Socialism out there to more people, you can just by hitting the like button, hitting the share button, leaving a comment even. This is the easiest things that you can do to help us get this message through the big tech algorithms that stifle this type of content from seeing more people. So, Justin, you recently wrote an article that was published in The Hill titled Americans' Middle Class is Getting Hooked on Government Cash and Democrats Aren't Done Yet. So you start off this article saying that future historians looking back on the events of 2020 and 2021 are going to have their work cut out for them. From the coronavirus pandemic to the fallout of the 2020 election, the first 2 years of the 2020s have already proven to be some of the most important in recent decades. But among all of the far-reaching reforms, policy, and societal changes experienced since the start of 2020, perhaps one of the most perhaps the one with the potential to have the most substantial long-term impact on public policy is the middle class's growing dependence on government aid. So you referenced in those opening paragraphs that a lot has transpired over the past 18 months, yet you say the policy that may have the most substantial long-term impact is the middle class's growing dependence on government aid. So before we get into the impact and implications of these policies, let's start with the context of those policies themselves. What are you referring to?
Well, there's a whole bunch of things, really, and there's a lot of people listening to this or watching this who are, maybe don't want to hear this, and I get it. I don't necessarily blame anyone for taking advantage of the programs that we're going to be talking about here at all. I don't blame anybody for taking advantage of if the government is offering you something and it's legal, by all means, take it. I mean, if they're going to give you a tax break, take the tax break. If they're going to provide you with government cash, take the cash. By all
Right.
means, do that. But is this good for society is a totally different subject, and that's the issue. So there's a whole bunch of things in the article. I highlight a few of them. One is, of course, the expansion of the child tax credit, which recently went into effect. This is Joe Biden and Democrats want to expand this permanently, but essentially the child tax credit was expanded dramatically under Donald Trump and Republicans in the 2017 tax law. They've now expanded it again under the coronavirus stimulus package that was passed earlier in 2021. Except this time they're providing it to not only more people, but they're giving them more money, and they're giving them it through monthly payments of $250 to $300 per child in the household. And you're eligible for this all the way up to $150,000 a year for a couple. And that's again, $250 to $300 depending on the age of the child per child. So you could be getting $1,000 or even more per month per child for all your children, for a couple making $150,000 a year who didn't necessarily even lose their jobs.
Right.
Now you have to ask yourself, what does that have to do with coronavirus relief? I mean, these are people who didn't even necessarily lose any employment, have any negative impact. Maybe they're actually better off than they were before the pandemic started financially. And now you're just giving them $1,000 potentially a month, $300 a month, $600 a month, whatever, for their just because they happen to have children. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And this is geared, obviously, toward the middle class. They're the ones that have the most children. So there's no doubt about it. There's something like, I don't have the number in front of me, but it's tens of millions. I want to say it's 60 or 70 million children are going to be households. Children will be affected by this. That doesn't mean 60 or 70 million households, obviously, but the vast majority of children do not live in poverty. So we're talking tens of millions of children who do not live in poverty, who will be in households that get these payments. And again, all the way up to $150,000 for a couple. You could be living a really nice upper middle class lifestyle for $150,000 a year.
Sure.
Depending on where you live and depending on how much debt you have and all of that. But you could have a really nice lifestyle, and now the government's giving you $1,000 a month or something because you have 3 kids. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the later policies. This is on the heels of the big stimulus payments that have happened over the course of the last 18 months.
That's right.
Enhanced unemployment money. Is that still going on? I'm not entirely even sure. But there's been a number of these. All of these, in the hopes of stimulating the economy because of the government-induced shutdown over the pandemic.
Yeah. So one of the things that I cite in the article is this study that was conducted by the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, and they found that that working and middle class families earning between $65,000 to $111,300 per year will receive, on average, this year in 2021. So we're not talking about the stuff that they already received in 2020. This is just this year, an average of $2,910 in stimulus money and an average of $620 in child tax credits for a total of $3,500 in government printed money. Now, some of these people may need that, but a lot of them probably don't need that. And so again, these stimulus dollars we're just handing out to people, whether they need it or not, doesn't really make sense. And the same study found that people earning $111,000 up to $247,000 will receive an average of $2,200 in stimulus money and $570 in child tax credits. So those people probably, the vast majority of them definitely don't need the money.
Right.
And yet you're giving them the money anyway. So there's the college education thing where people are they're not required to pay back their student loans, right? That's another one that's
been going on for over a year now. People the vast majority of people with federal student loans, no matter how much money you make, you could be a wealthy Wall Street trader who earns $1 million a year, and you don't have to make payments on your student loans. You haven't had to make payments for over a year. If you have most federal student loans fall into that category. So it doesn't even matter how much money you have in the bank, doesn't matter how high your income is. Nobody has been required to make payments on their federal student loans for over a year. And they're talking about extending this all the way into to March of 2022, which would be 2 full years without having to make any payments. And they could extend that even further. Some Democrats are demanding that they don't reinstate the payments until we reach pre-pandemic employment levels, which may never happen. We may never get to that ever again. So obviously these programs are all designed to target the middle class, the upper middle class, people who traditionally lean conservative, people who traditionally are not dependent on government, people who are not used to getting lots of cash thrown at them by federal programs and things like that. That's why they're doing this. It's not because they've been impacted by the pandemic. It's because the government is trying to buy these people off. They're trying to buy support from them. That's what this is all about. And because we live in a universe now where you can print as much money as you want, it doesn't matter. Modern monetary theory, which we've been talking about forever. This is all possible now, when in the past, this would never have been tolerated. So, I mean, advocates of these policies, and they're not all limited to the left, I might add. They would justify, these are extraordinary measures for extraordinary times, and the policies will go away once we regain normalcy. But, you say that this has substantial long-term impact, so you don't think these are going to go away?
I think we know for a fact that they don't want the expanded child tax credit to go away. They're openly advocating to make it permanent. They're putting it in legislation. They're trying to make it permanent. They haven't passed it yet, but they're trying.
Wow.
The student loan thing, in and of itself, just if you just look at it on its face, it's obvious that this isn't about trying to help people. You and I have talked about this many times on the phone and stuff like that, because this is one of the things that drives me more insane than almost anything else. Because it really is, because I'm insane a lot. What people don't understand about most people who are not intimately familiar with the federal student loan system, they just have no idea how any of this works. But because I am riddled with student loan debt, just absolutely crushing student loan debt, I know this system really, really well.
All those books behind them are actually just filled with IOUs.
Yeah. You know how much money it costs to buy all these books? You have no idea. I'll be in debt for the rest of my life because of that. So thankfully, I won't ever have to pay it back. But that's a totally different thing. So look, here's the thing. The current system is set up so that the vast majority of people who have federal student loans, students especially, younger people who they graduate from college or they're still in college, they are under an income-based repayment plan. Everybody who needs this essentially qualifies for this, or the vast majority of people who need it. So your payments that you pay back on your student loans, no matter how much student loan debt you have could have $1 million of student loan debt, or you could have $20,000 of student loan debt. And a lot of the people, young people who come out of college, are able to get into a income-based repayment plan, which means your payment amount every month is tied to your income. All right, this has been in place now for a long time. This was something that's to varying degrees been around for probably like 15, 20 years. Obama was a really big part of all of this. All right, now so what does this have to do with the pandemic? Well, let's say you lost your job in the pandemic and you were in an income-based repayment plan, and now you can't make your monthly student loan payment. All you have to do is contact your loan servicer, and they immediately stop the payment on you, and you file some paperwork, and they lower your amount that you owe every month to $0 a month, and you don't make any payments. And let's say you get a job maybe a couple months later, but you're only making half of what you made before. Well, your student loan payments will be adjusted based on how much money you make. The most I think that you pay is like between 10 and 15%, if I remember right, of your income. So you're not going to be paying any more than that, no matter how much money you make. And many people who are sort of lower working class type people, entry-level job people, are paying almost nothing in their payments because it doesn't start at $0 and work its way up. There's a threshold at the bottom for how much to even qualify for any payments at all. So the point that I'm making is, why are we delaying it? Sure. If all the people who needed help were going to get the help anyway, then why are we delaying it? Now, there were some people who didn't qualify for the income-based repayment plan who benefited from all of this because they lost their job and they weren't in that payment plan, and maybe there was some weird circumstance where they didn't qualify. But the solution would have been just to let them qualify for it and
Right.
put them in that plan with everybody else. Instead, what they did was say, no matter how much money you make, no matter who you are, you don't have to pay your student loans back. And it doesn't matter whether you've been impacted by the pandemic or not. So again, this is all... It's a scam. It's an obvious scam. I don't need to. This isn't like some right-wing conspiracy. The facts just speak for themselves. Obviously, they're trying to buy people off with stimulus money and with these cushy deals and everything.
So, I mean, is that your biggest concern about all of this? Is that like the government is buying complacency, like essentially buying support for this type of stuff? Because later in your article, you say, the most disturbing part of all of this isn't that politicians are acting recklessly. That's par for the course these days. The real thing to be worried about is that most Americans in the middle class don't seem to care about their quote-unquote free lunch today. Could cause a full-blown financial crisis in the months and years to come. So, in your opinion, is the potential for like a financial crisis the biggest concern, or like the political ramifications of just, people keep voting for the thing that's filling their wallets with money?
Well, I think both are concerning, obviously, but without a doubt, the biggest problem here is the more we print money, the more we continue to print money, the more we go deeper and deeper into the modern monetary theory rabbit hole, the more impossible it is to dig yourself out of it, to return to fiscal normalcy, to have a budget that's not, a balanced budget, like, that's like inconceivable. I would love to just get to a universe where we're within like $500 billion of a balanced budget. Like, that would be amazing at this point. The White House released its budget earlier this year, and in its own estimates, it said that the deficit over the next decade will never drop below $1.3 trillion. That's per year. And at the end of the 10-year period, this is coming from the White House, who's obviously painting this picture as rosy as they possibly can.
Sure.
At the end of the 10-year period, the deficit is actually higher than that. It's actually going up toward the end of this 10-year period. So,
and of course, this is their best case scenario, which will never pan out. So surely reality will be much worse than that.
Exactly. And so the problem is that the more money we print, the more money we're going to have to keep printing in the future in order to keep servicing the debt that we have, which means it's going to eat up an even greater part of our budget every single year. We're going to need to keep printing money in order to keep this thing going over and over and over. We have to keep the interest rates really low to make sure that we can keep servicing the debt, which continues to fund all of these awful programs that exist, not just in government, but also with banks and financial institutions and other things that are the proliferation of cheap money creates all sorts of distortions in the marketplace that drives up the prices of all kinds of things and creates inflation in marketplaces that create bubbles and real estate crises and all kinds of things. We've seen this over and over and over again. This has been going on forever. We know what's going to happen. And this problem is getting worse and worse and worse, and exponentially so. Also, that we can give people a break on student loan payments that they can afford to pay. Also, that we can send cash in the mail to people who don't really need it. Also, that we can do all of these things. Give people extra money because they have kids, even if they're making $150,000 a year. None of this makes any sense. Right. You are taking money from the government that you don't need, and by doing that, contributing to the possibility of a gigantic financial crash in the future. Because we're creating distortions through the monetary system, which is collapsing. And people don't realize it's collapsing, but it is. We are on the road to the dollar being totally wiped out. It may not happen next year, it may not happen 5 years, it might take 10, 20, I don't know when, but it will happen.
Sure.
Because it makes no sense. And anybody with just basic logic and a basic understanding of the monetary system will understand this is not sustainable. And that's why you see cryptocurrencies and other things becoming more popular. It's because there's lots of people out there who understand. That's why the price of gold is super high right now. They understand that this system really is completely illogical and is bound to crash eventually. And when it does, it's going to be extremely painful, and all of the goodies that you're getting today are not worth all the pain that's coming as a result of these kinds of policies.
Well, I was going to ask you for any final thoughts on this topic, but I think that that's probably a good place to end it right there. If you want to read the article that we're talking about in length, we'll provide the link in the show notes. However, Justin, you publish multiple articles a week, so where can the fine people find your other work?
Well, of course, you can go to stoppingsocialism.com. It's just an amazing website. I love it very much. And you can also go to heartland.org. If you're looking for my columns specifically, I'm writing most frequently these days for the Washington Examiner, The Hill, and of course for foxnews.com and Town Hall every once in a while there as well.
All right, fantastic. Yep, you mentioned stoppingsocialism.com. You could also find more videos like this on Stopping Socialism TV on YouTube. We also have social media that we, share most of our content, whether it's on Facebook, Stopping Socialism. We have an Instagram account. We have a Parler account. We pretty much have every account out there. So if you look hard enough, you will find us. But that'll do it for this segment of Stopping Socialism TV. We will talk to you next time.